This is Photoshop tutorial number 10. I want you to open the image called um, Dodge and Burn, this one. So once you've opened the image, what we're going to do to this image is to use a technique called Dodge and Burn, which is essentially adding contrast to the image. And by contrast, I mean making the highlights brighter and the shadows darker. So whenever you choose to add contrast to an image, that's what you're doing. You're making highlights brighter and shadows darker. But if you are to just do this by using a contrast layer, just increase the contrast, see how it just affects the whole image. But if you have selective things that you want to change, so say I want to increase the highlights but not of the sky, only of the leaves, or if I want to make the shadows darker but only here, not up here. So you can do that with masking, as we've seen before, where you can use a layer mask and then paint on the layer mask and choose the parts that you don't want to be, having that change made to it. That's one way of doing it. Another way is to add a dodge and burn layer, which is a way of making a layer that allows you to make adjustments to the highlights and the shadows by changing the color of the brush in a similar way that we would to the mask. But instead of working on a white or a black layer, we're working on a gray layer. So essentially you go layer, new, layer. So you can't do it from here when you just click the new layer button. You have to go new layer so that it comes up with these options. So then if you choose to change the blend mode, this one here, to overlay, you'll get this option that says fill overlay neutral color 50% gray. Click yes on that one and then title this a dodge and burn layer. So what this means is it's going to create a layer that's gray that sits on top of this layer, and although it's sitting on top and it's gray, it doesn't make any difference to the image below. The reason why is because it has an overlay layer, overlay blend mode. If I was to make this a normal blend mode, you'll just have a gray. You've essentially made a gray layer on top of the original image, but we've changed the blend mode to overlay so that it blends the two layers together. So now, when I use the paintbrush tool, if I paint with a black paintbrush on this gray layer, you'll see it makes the image darker. So what that's doing is, but it's not just painting it black, you can see it's actually just painting the whole image darker. So what that's doing is it's decreasing the exposure to the part that you've painted. This is going to take a while to load now. But if I was to just do a bit like that, say, you look at the mask now, or the layer now, and you've got that black part there where it's been made, the exposure's been made darker. Opposite to that, if I was to paint with a white brush, then I would be brightening that part of the image. So not actually making it white or black, but white means brighten, black means darken on a grey dodge and burn layer. So the way that you use this technique effectively is to use a low opacity. So you change it down to say 15%, and then you selectively choose the areas that you want to adjust. So in this instance, what I want to do is I want to make the sun really bright, and I want to make the highlights on top of these vineyards, the grapes, stand out, and then make the rest of the image a little bit darker so that there's a focus on this central part of the image. So I'm going to do that by, I'm going to go 100 on this and just click once on that sun. See how I've just made the sun a bit brighter. It's probably a bit bright, so I'm going to go down to 80 and I'm going to make my cursor a bit smaller so that now you can see it just looks a little bit more natural. Now I'm going to make the cursor smaller again. I'm just going to paint along the tops of grapes. Make the cursor smaller going off into the distance. So now you can see I've increased the brightness on the tops of the vineyard and the sun itself. So now if I change the cursor, the color to black, and I paint with a black paintbrush, and let's change the opacity right down to say 15. I'm just going to be selectively making parts of the image a touch darker. So you can see if I just paint this corner here, it's only gone down a shade. And if you look very closely at the mask, you'll see it's slightly darker grey in that corner. As if I click it 2 or 3 times here, it starts to get a bit darker. You can start to look at this grey layer and start to see the differences between the black parts, the white parts, and the grey parts. I don't like what I did there, but you can see now how that's just a bit dodgy there. So you can see now how this is how the original image looked. Now, with the adjustments layer that I've made, I haven't done the best job, it's a little bit dodgy, but you can fix that by just going back and forth between the black and the white. So this bit here, so we'd want to brighten that up a bit. So we can come in paintbrush, make sure we've got white selected, and then smaller, just paint that a bit brighter. A bit touch more. So we've created this effect where it looks like the sun is just piercing through the trees here and lighting these bushes. And the rest of the image is sort of a bit darker, which is what we want. So this is called dodge and burn, and you can use this in many different other images. Essentially, the idea is that you're changing the contrast of the image, but doing it to parts of the image that you are selecting to do it to, as opposed to just doing it to the whole image. So remember that's layer, new layer, blend mode, overlay. You fill the grey layer. You're going to end up with a grey layer, and then you paint using the paintbrush and the black and white, with white to make parts brighter and black to make parts darker. You're painting on that grey layer, and that's how you add contrast to an image selectively using dodge and burn. So once you're done, you can export that image as dodge and burn export. And that's all.